Thanks for joining us today. Today we're talking to Anna Bond, the principal, lead attorney, lead partner, owner, founder of Bond Family Law, and about her practice in the field of family law, where she has carved a path as an associate and a partner, and then eventually into her own firm. She has a really unique and interesting experience as far as what it takes to build an expertise in a highly contentious field that really balances out kind of practical lawyering skills as well as litigation skills. I think you'll find it really interesting to hear her perspective and her experience within the field, as well as her advice for those who are looking to come into the area of family law and those who are having difficulty finding their path within the space. Well, Anna, thanks for taking the leap and being here with us today.
Absolutely.
And can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your business is?
Sure. I'm Anna Bond, and I run Bond Family Law, which is a law firm specializing primarily in all things divorce related. So people who are wondering about divorce, people who are going through divorce, or people who have after effects of divorce.
Okay. And family law, divorce, obviously these are kind of loaded areas. You're dealing with kind of highly contentious things, at least for the most part, or at least things we would associate with that. So what draws you to that area of law?
So the law that I picked is pretty interesting because it involves both law, which is, of course, the statutes and the precedent that's been set in this state, but it involves people. So it's their set of circumstances, helping them get through, helping them resolve what is always an incredibly difficult time.
Sure. Well, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I guess a lot of people come into the law for plenty of reasons. I feel like the story I always hear, some version of I watched Law and Order as a kid and I just wanted to do that. So what brought you into the legal field? So being a lawyer was the only thing I ever wanted to do. Okay. From when I was fairly young. And then I went through college, gained a business degree, and wondered if I would, in fact, go to law school. Spent a couple years teaching abroad, discovered that that was not anything that was going to be a permanent calling for me. And when I returned to the United States, I knew law school was my route. Okay. So what kind of made you take that zigzag, right? You're in business school, you're not sure if the law is going to be for you. You go to teach overseas, and then you now know for a fact that you really are meant to go into the law. So what was the pull there? What was the thing that made you decide that you shouldn't be elsewhere? I think business was interesting, but it didn't hook me in entirely. Sure. Teaching was an amazing experience because I was working with some fantastic kids in a super unique environment. But ultimately, law just was the thing that resonated for me as I looked at what my path would be sort of for the rest of my life. Sure. And going to law school was pretty interesting in that the coursework does not immediately identify for you what you want to do and where you want to spend your time, effort, and energy, where you want to put your focus. But I did have the opportunity to take a clinic and practice under the Student Practice Act. And in that forum, I was able to engage with the clients, defend a couple of people on Social Security disability issues, and it made me realize I wanted to be in an area of law where I was dealing both with law, but also pretty intimately with people as well. Sure. So, I mean, you had the opportunity to work on Social Security law, which might be one of the most heart attack, gut-wrenching, oh God, why would anybody ever want to practice that area, fields of law. So you went from that to family law, which again, highly emotional, highly contentious. So where was the aha moment in that process? Truly, as I took all the courses and learned the basics and went through what I consider to be some of the less interesting and engaging law when I took the family law course, when you realized how much it involved people's stories and how significant of an impact it had, I knew it was for me. Sure. So what was the, I guess it's the coursework, but then did you go do like an L2, L3 summer internship or clerkship, or how did you actually kind of get your first taste of really that being it for you?
Well, I didn't get the taste in the way that you would imagine. So I had a clerkship at the Attorney General's office working in real estate.
Okay, very different.
Confirmed for me. That was not my interest.
Sure.
And then I went to work for a small law firm that practiced criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
And they were intending to take on some family law clients. So I had the opportunity as a law clerk still as a law student, to shadow an attorney who had not really worked in the area. So I was doing a bunch of the research and I was figuring out a bunch of the paths forward for these folks. And that's how I knew it was for me.
Sure. So you're in a practice that sort of branches into the space. You're helping them kind of cut their teeth in that field, or were you working under a more senior attorney who had a lot of experience in that and was kind of bringing their practice into this other practice?
No, so it was essentially a whole lot of research, a whole lot of learning, a whole lot of figuring it out, which was pretty amazing because it gave me instantaneous all access to the clients, all ability to succeed or fail in the cases as they came into my sphere.
Sure. So then you go through this process, and did you become a partner of that firm at that time, or did you go to another firm that really specialized in that field?
So that was a partnership of two attorneys who then ended that partnership, and I went to work for one of those partners.
Okay.
Again, he was not practicing family law, so I had the opportunity to do all that I wanted and all that I needed, basically by learning myself. And then if I had, heavy lifting trial questions, of course, as a criminal defense attorney, he'd definitely done trial work. So that was a nice, I'll say, backstop for some of the harder, more complex things. But in terms of family law, from day one, I've had the opportunity to be all in.
Sure. Well, and it's kind of an interesting career path because you hear about people going from law school to the bar to trying to get a big law job, or you get people trying to get kind of counsel roles or in-house roles. And it seems like the career path for the legal field, which has been around in some way, shape, or form for a really long time, always seems to be a little bit different. It doesn't seem like it's a easy way to kind of show up on day one and just stick with a firm for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So you not only went into a firm that had no real expertise in the area you were going to end up practicing in, but you sort of got to learn it from the ground up as opposed to from sort of a tutelage model. So you've been in this field of practice for how long now?
16 years.
So 16 years of family law experience. You learned it from the ground up, kind of on a foundational approach, as opposed to from a mentorship, learn it on the job sort of way, except you were on the job and learning it. So how do you feel that sort of distinguishes your perspective or experience from attorneys who went to go work for a family law firm that you face down in the courtroom or in mediation or anything else?
It has functioned to put me probably at a 20-plus year attorney equivalent.
Sure.
So attorneys who had the opportunity to practice under someone and learn from someone simply just didn't have to gain the knowledge and gain the practice skills at the rate of speed that I did. And because I wasn't in a back room doing research instead of interacting with clients, I literally handled all the aspects from the beginning. Which for me, has worked out fantastically well because I have had such a tremendous amount of experience in a moderately short amount of time.
Sure. Well, but 16 years isn't a short amount of time, at least for most of us.
Right. In the legal profession, right now, some of my adversaries have been practicing close to 30 years.
Sure.
So it's, but I find myself creeping close to functionally equivalent to those professionals. But it's just such a vastly different experience base compared to people who started out just doing research and answering questions for people.
Sure. So you go from one firm with two partners, you kind of start the family law branch, as it were. That partnership breaks up. You go to work for one of those partners. You are the family law subject matter expert inside of that practice. So how do you get from there to now?
Well, so I started, you're correct, as an employee and on a partner track. So within 5 years, I was a partner with my now former partner who practiced criminal defense. And we had some interplay, maybe a handful of cases through the years that we worked on together. But for the most part, we just ran separate practices because of our client base. And at a certain point when I really thought, my side of the practice could expand far beyond what we had the trajectory for, I thought it was time to change boxes and branch off and be exclusively bond family law. So about 3 years ago, I opened the doors, and we've been off to the races since then.
Sure. So what are some of the challenges going from, I would say, almost sounds like you were a partner kind of from day one, maybe not literally or legally or in terms of equity, but as far as being the senior person within pretty much every practice you've been a part of in your field. What would you say were the differences from being inside of another firm and growing within another firm, even though you were kind of the point person for that role, and actually running your fully owned separate practice?
I think the biggest change is not having truly a partner in which to have any of the discussions about where the business is going, bringing someone on. The pluses of that are the complete autonomy of being able to make all the decisions, hire who you believe is going to be your next best person in that position, and move forward as you see fit. You're not discussing salary or benefits. You're not discussing how the firm functions, how you interact with clients. And so that autonomy is pretty spectacular. It can be, of course, then with that autonomy comes the complete other side of that same equation, which is the independence. And so it's the next decision of which person to hire, or where to find growth, or where you want to invest in terms of technology for your firm, what resources you think best serve your goals and what you're trying to achieve. And so doing all of that as an independent person can sometimes be a bit much.
Sure. So would you say that's kind of the greatest set of difficulties you encounter being a firm owner or a firm founder is what you just laid out, or would you say it lies somewhere else?
I think definitely. I mean, at this juncture, the law is something that I enjoy. And sure, it's time consuming and an investment of thought and resources, mine as well as my staff. But the tricky part is in the administrative side of the firm, for sure.
Sure. So, I mean, the law, again, is a very well-developed profession. There's a lot of standards, a ton of rules, probably more rules than any other profession, of course. Do you feel like you have a lot of freedom to kind of grow and operate and manage the business the way you want to, or do you feel like there's so much precedent within your field that there's only so many options?
I think in general, law has some fixed components. I mean, certainly the simple fact that in order to get into court, you have to be a licensed and barred attorney in the state of Colorado. So if I want someone else beyond myself going to court for any reason, then that has to include an associate attorney position. Beyond that, in terms of however else I wish to staff my firm or compile my resources, certainly I work within an industry where it is up to me how I choose to do that, which is pretty nice.
Sure. Do you feel like as the firm owner, you end up with more or less of the responsibility for kind of the success? Or do you feel like it's more about the team that you build and the systems you put in place?
I would say it's a blend. On the one hand, as the person who's truly in charge and the person whose licensure is always front and center, it behooves me to pay close attention to what's happening. That being said, there's no way I could do what I do without my staff. Sure. They're amazing, and every single role is critical. And to discount, someone who deals on the front side with the clients, or to say that one person's more important than the other, quite frankly, without all of us, we wouldn't be able to pull off what we do.
Sure. So what would you say are then sort of the advantages of being a practice of your size when you compare yourself either to a total solo practitioner or a big firm coming in? Where do you think the strengths lie in that situation?
I think our strength lies truly in client contact and client service. So we are able to truly hear the clients and work with them. So if they're saying something that is not going to really be helpful to them in reaching their goals, we are able to layer in some support or make some pretty strong recommendations about what they need to add in to give us our best chance at success. And we know the clients. Every single person in my office knows the clients, so they can call and feel like they're not a stranger, they're not a number, they're not I'm sorry, what was your name again? Do we know you type of person, not at our firm. Mm-hmm. And that's very distinct. So larger firms have to work in a different manner. And that means you're getting someone at the front desk who may not know who you are.
Sure.
So pretty significant differentiation.
Sure. Now, in a kind of environment like Boulder, the city of Boulder County, the Northern Front Range, right? We work in an environment, or we live in an environment that has a higher cost of living, a higher average income, a very well-educated kind of population, at least compared to national averages. Do you feel like that's a different environment to practice in than if you were in, a city in the middle of Ohio or Florida or something like that? Or do you think that doesn't really bring any real cultural or technical challenges to it?
I think being in Boulder has its own unique, it is its own unique experience. So we practice across the metropolitan area for a reason, mm-hmm. So that we have that diversity of clients. But even within Boulder, it's not just your stereotype, but every jurisdiction we find has a bit of its own nuances. Mm-hmm. We strive to keep kind of a balanced caseload, a balanced type of client, so that we truly are cognizant of what everybody experiences.
Sure.
But it is true, in Boulder, it's a little bit different.
Sure. What
the clients struggle with and what they experience is a little bit different here.
And what's the joke? 20 square miles surrounded by reality, or 20 square miles of Boulder surrounded by reality.
Exactly.
So yeah, practicing in and out obviously is going to diversify that experience.
Yes.
So taking the kind of lawyer hat off for a second, and just looking at it purely as a business owner, what would you say are kind of the unique opportunities of running a business in a professional service? Do you feel like there's sort of an opportunity to do business differently than the average maybe retail business or the kind of more common service business? Or do you feel like, kind of back to one of the questions earlier, there's more of a constraint in having a more professional, more regulated field?
I think truly the size of practice that I run and the location where I run it gives us a pretty high level of freedom and flexibility. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to me to be able to provide that to clients. I want them to come in and feel like we care about their lives. But I also don't want them to come in and feel like, if they're telling me a story about their kid learning to ride their bike, that they're necessarily on the clock and we're billing it extensively for that. Mm-hmm. So we are pretty cognizant of and careful to really keep clients in mind. We like to celebrate birthdays by sending out cards. We like to sort of memorialize the end of their work with us in some way. Sure. Whether that's, with a note or a gift or just, a one-on-one meeting, so that they have a sense of closure, so that they just know how much we have learned and taken away from working with them and getting them to their end point.
Sure. What do you feel like the greatest difficulties are?
The greatest difficulties? Probably just the emotional minefield of the practice area, which means that sometimes it's not something very big, sometimes it's something very small that has a significant derailing effect. And we can't always know what those things are. And so sometimes that comes as a bit of surprise. And so to have to rebalance when people are upset over something that to us would not be as significant as it is to them can kind of catch you off guard and make you get creative.
Does anything particular come to mind there? Is it a particular type of issue? Is it a family dynamic? What tends to be the big hurdle in all of the different issues that can come up?
I think the hardest thing is really customizing what we do to how the person got in our doors in the first place. So some people arrive because they believe their circumstances have altered so much that they need to make a change. And some people come through our doors because the change has been dropped onto them. And those are two very different perspectives. Those are two very different paths that those people are on. And getting aligned with those people and staying aligned with them as they walk through all the things we need them to do is probably the biggest challenge.
Sure. Do you feel like there's maybe a negative perception? Do you feel like you have to prove value to those folks who are coming in the door every time they come in? Or do you feel like if by the time somebody gets to you, they probably know that you're going to be the person who can really solve the problem?
I think for the most part, so we happen to have a lot of high conflict individuals. So these are people who have already determined that they cannot solve these situations on their own. Mm-hmm. And so they're coming in looking for solutions. They generally have a sense of the value add of a professional, and we try and pick up that ball and run with it so that they get a bit of a break.
Sure. Do you ever come into contact with or deal with clients who are just questioning it the whole time? Or is that something that kind of filters itself by the time people are working with you?
We definitely have those clients who, I guess, are kind of surprised or shocked to find themselves in our office to continue to have to provide us with information and work with us as we work to resolve their set of circumstances. And that's difficult. We don't profess to be counselors in our firm, so we always encourage and recommend that people find support in ways in which best support them. But we end up being counselors and pretty significant support people as they go through their process.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of a funny thing, but the number of professionals you talk to, whether it's in the legal field, medical field, architecture, kitchen design, whatever it is, it seems like everybody has a joke about being a marriage counselor or being a personal therapist. It seems like it's a burden that falls upon professionals all the time. But in your case, I mean, it's as literal as it gets, right? Short of actually being a therapist. You were dealing with people in possibly one of the most difficult things they've ever had to deal with, again, either by choice or by change of circumstance, or it's been foisted upon them. Do you ever feel like that is maybe more of your responsibility than it should be, or is it just part of doing business in your field?
It's a high level of responsibility. I think on a bad day, you wish your clients came in with the best therapists and the best support crew so that you didn't have to provide that role. Because quite frankly, there's no way any one person could have experienced all the things that all the clients have experienced. Sure. So you're searching to try and best connect with them, best support them, but many times it's with circumstances that you only understand anecdotally. And so, again, there are professionals who are educated and experienced in supporting these people, but we have certainly learned a lot along the way because we want people to feel calm and reassured and able to move forward as best they can by working with our team.
Sure. Now, I mean, on that point, right, you are a professional. You offer professional service. It's white glove. It's very high touch. It's very, as you said, you deal with a lot of high conflict. So you're dealing with people who are, essentially dealing with probably, I would guess, a more difficult case than maybe the average. And you can correct my assumption there if you'd like. What do you say to people who look at the legal field and criticize it, who say, legal services are too expensive or they're not accessible to people of lower income, or who think that technology is just going to sort of do away with the whole process at some point? As somebody who does the work every single day, I mean, what do you say to that, or how do you think about that?
It is my belief that certainly in the family law arena, attorneys aren't going anywhere.
Sure.
There is already a process in place where people can go this road themselves as self-represented litigants if that's something that their situation will allow. Mm-hmm. And we sometimes have people who've tried that and then, come into our firm needing the assistance to help them get, through the entire process.
Sure.
So in terms of, can this role be filled by processes and forms and checking boxes? Perhaps for some. And we certainly are happy and do often provide advice for those who believe that they can go it on their own. Mm-hmm. There are so many procedural deadlines and areas in which missteps can be made that we provide that service, mm-hmm. even though it's, I think, can be difficult to fully comprehend all the moving parts.
Sure.
But we want to give people the opportunity to proceed in the way that they best feel their path, opening in front of them. But
sure.
Clients and, this area of law. This area of law is far more complex than some of your transactional areas, some of your less people-oriented areas. It could be that from a rule parsing perspective, contracts or transactions are more complicated. However, when you're blending law and lives and people, I don't think you have a more complex area in which to exist than family law.
And I would say that's probably pretty darn true. So where do you see the field of family law going, right? Where is your firm going to be in the next 20 or 30 years?
In my opinion, family law is going to probably, like the rest of things, need to be more streamlined, need to be more efficient, ways in which you can allow people to do for themselves and provide you with completed information instead of the parts. Those are areas where things can be streamlined. When it comes down to how does that information get translated into what the judge needs to hear, I think that's still lawyers. So in terms of my practice, I anticipate growth and more people involved in my firm who have the same mindset and the same belief system, who want to support clients in this exact same way, but we're not going anywhere.
So if you're let's say you're an L2 or an L3 right now looking to get into the family law field, what should you be doing to find that first great family law practice position?
You should be pursuing any opportunity to be in the family law arena. So if your law school offers a clinical program that allows you to do some student lawyering under the Student Practice Act, or if you're able to take any classes, join any clubs. So there are varying coursework, so there's juvenile law and family law, but any of the type of classes that indicate to a prospective employer that this is not just a job you're applying for, but it is actually an interest that you have. Whether that, you could also, I think, shadow a lawyer for a day. I think sort of the sky's the limit in terms of creativity, but find ways in which you can determine whether you really are interested and that you can demonstrate to prospective employers that you are interested.
Sure. And what would you say when L3s are coming to you or brand new attorneys are coming to you looking for that position? What would you say is maybe the biggest mistake they could be avoiding?
The biggest mistake they could be avoiding, I think, is believing that a boutique firm or a mid-sized firm is somehow going to result in an immediately, instantaneously TV-worthy, glamorous practice. I can appreciate how, you come out of law school, you've passed the bar exam, and you are ready to be the next greatest lawyer. The reality is experience does give you a lot. And so if you can appreciate that it may take you a minute to get to, your sort of courtroom moment, I think that best serves you. If you're thinking you're too quickly getting into big cases and big litigation opportunities, it's probably a bad sign.
Fair enough. And in general, any advice for anybody out there running a law firm who's struggling or just not seeing the path forward that you've been able to find?
Honestly, I think finding attorneys in your community who can give you some guidance, answer some questions. I think attorneys that probably are far kinder than they may seem. Looking from the outside, I think, successful attorneys have the opportunity to be selective in terms of which clients they take. And there's not a need to see others fail in order for themselves to succeed. So ask questions. And if you need guidance, you want advice on what thing may help you from a business perspective, ask. And I bet somebody will answer.
Anna, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience with us.
Absolutely.
Taking the Leap is filmed in Longmont, Colorado. Produced by Jeff Zimmerman. Audio and visual by M3 Films. Taking the Leap is a program by My Wealth Planners, an independent, fee-only registered investment advisor.